Former Union Minister and Congress leader Chidambaram is addressing a press conference. Let's cross live.
Preliminary comments on the budget. Obviously, one has to study the papers very carefully. The time has been short. But there are some conclusions that we can arrive at, and we thought we'll share those conclusions with you. Firstly, listening to the budget speech and reading it again in print, I'm afraid one cannot avoid the feeling that the budget leans heavily in favor of the corporate sector and the class that pays income tax. We have nothing against the corporate sector or the class that pays income tax, but I think it's good to remind ourselves that a very, very large number of people in this country, close to over 100 crore people, do not fall under the corporate sector and do not pay income tax. A budget must acknowledge them, acknowledge their concerns, and attempt to deal with the concerns. That, I'm afraid, is missing in the budget for 2015-16. The budget also makes some very tall claims. The finance minister began with a jibe that he inherited a sentiment of doom and gloom. But just 5 minutes later into his speech, he acknowledged the numbers put forward by the Central Statistics Organization. That office is part of his government. If he believes those numbers, as he did for the projection made for 2014-15, he should also believe those numbers for the estimate they made for 2013-14. And the CSO did say that in 2013-14, growth had dramatically recovered from 5.1% in the previous year to 6.9%. So when the UPA left office, it left office with an economy that was well on the way to recovery, and growth had been 6.9%. It's unfortunate that the government refuses to acknowledge that fact. Be that as it may, some numbers are quite astonishing. For example, the budget says that they will push back the year in which they will achieve the fiscal deficit target of 3% by 1 year. I'm not going into the reasons for that. That can be reserved for another meeting or another article. Let's assume that that is a genuine reason, which means government will borrow an additional amount of rupees 37,500 crore. Where is this 37,500 crore going? As far as I'm able to see, total expenditure is increasing from 16,81,158 crore in the current year to 17,77,477 crore in the next year. That is an increase of about 96,000 crore. So the additional borrowing is going as additional expenditure, But what kind of expenditure? If total expenditure went up by about 96,000 crore, one would have expected that total plan expenditure will go up. But what do you find here? Plan expenditure will actually come down from 4,67,934 crore this year to 4,65,277 crore next year. So the additional borrowing is not going into plan expenditure. It's going into non-plan expenditure. The quality of government expenditure is how much it is able to set apart for plan. Every year, as far as I can recall, we have increased plan expenditure. I think in recent memory, this must be the first year in which plan expenditure is projected to drop. I think more detailed analysis can be made later, but the point I'm making is, it seems to me, just as the Planning Commission was bid goodbye, they're probably thinking of bidding goodbye to plan itself. We also looked into some other numbers. Some of these numbers have to be verified again, but based on a preliminary study, it appears to us that there have been some cruel, unjust cuts for sectors that look up to the government for relief and help and succor. For example, for scheduled castes in 2014-15, under the scheduled caste sub-plan, the allocation was 43,208 crore. In 2015-16, what we find is the allocation is 30,851 crore. For scheduled tribes, in the current year 2014-15, the allocation was 26,714 crore. For the next year, it is 19,980 crore. I can give you some more numbers, and I'm sure you can do your research independently. Take, for example, the Integrated Child Development Services. In the current year, the budget papers show 18,691 crore. For next year, it is 8,754 crore. 754 crore. From 18,691 to 8,754 crore. National Social Assistance Program from 10,635 crore to 9,074 crore. Prime Minister's Employment Generation Program in micro, small and medium enterprises from 1,418 crore to 1,050 crore. Minority Affairs for multi-sectoral development programs for minorities, 1,250 crore to 1,244 crore. For environment and forest, especially for national afforestation and eco-development, from 1,169 crore to 688 crore. For the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, from 14,391 crore to 14,291 crore. One would have expected that these programs, which are meant for people who are among the most disadvantaged, will have an increased allocation. More money will be put aside for these programs. While the speech swears by these programs, in fact, there have been unjust cuts in these programs. Which is why we say that what is the government's leaning? Does it lean in favor of the poor? Does it lean in favor of those who are not within the income tax net? Those who are not among the income tax payers? Those who are not among the corporates? The answer appears to be no. The government says, well, growth will happen. When growth happens, you will get the benefit. Until then, fend for yourself. I think this is unjust. This goes against the grain of this country, goes against the ethos of this country. As long as in this country there are poor people. Yes, we lifted 140 million people out of poverty in 10 years, but there are many more to be lifted out of poverty. A government must lean in favor of the poor, and we do not find such a leaning in this budget. In fact, for the non-income taxpayer, since he buys goods and avails of services, they have to pay more. Excise duty has been increased across the board, and service tax has been increased across the board. So for the non-income taxpayer, he gets no relief, he also pays more tax. And the most surprising part is what they have thrown in favor of the corporates. The finance minister says that the effective corporate rate is about 23%. %23 yielded in the current year